Today is July 5th, 2016. We're in the Richard B. Russell Special Collections Library at the University of Georgia. And today I am with Lora Smothers, who is the director of the Freedom to Grow Unschool, located right outside Athens, Georgia. So hello.
Hi.
Good morning or good afternoon, actually.
It's good to be here.
So Lora, can you just let's start out, can you just tell me a little bit kind of about your early life, your early childhood? And since we're going to be talking a lot about education today, like what your early education was like
Yes.
that experience.
I'm happy to do that. I had several different educational experiences as a child in terms of the types of schools that I went to. I started off in public elementary school, and then in my middle school years, my family moved and I went to a prep school. And then from there, I went to a private Christian high school. So there was a little variety there, but I was definitely a kid who loved school and wanted to do really well in school. I was fairly perfectionistic about my schoolwork. In fact, I have a really vivid memory of there was one morning where my mom had to walk me into school because I was in tears, distraught because I didn't finish my homework, and I couldn't imagine the implications of that, So I did well in school.
Yeah.
I cared a lot about it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. What about your parents? How involved were they with school?
It's cool that you asked that. So my parents were school age in the time of integration, right? So they were among the first, my mom was in first grade when her city schools integrated. So as she went through school, she and her siblings were the first Black everything in their school.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle was the first Black pitcher on the baseball team, and my mom was the first Black student body president. And so it was sort of like all eyes were on them. And my grandmother was a teacher as well. So their education is a really high value in my family. So I think even though my parents didn't force that on me, I just sort of understood it. And so that had a big influence on the way I responded in the classroom as a child.
Yeah. So where did you actually grow up, or where did your parents grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in, a variety of places, but I call Florence, Alabama home. Mm-hmm. My dad grew up in Memphis, and my mom grew up in Hendersonville, North Carolina.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we're from the South.
From the South. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I gotcha. So where did you move then after you moved and you started prep school, right? Where
Yes, so we went from, at the time, I was born in Richmond, Virginia. We moved to Suffolk, Virginia. Then we moved to Florence, Alabama, which is where I did high school, the Christian high school. From there, I went to Emory University in Atlanta for undergrad and studied neuroscience and behavioral biology.
Tell me more about that. How did you decide to study that?
Yes, so it really relates to my story. In high school, I did it all. I was on the debate team. I played basketball. I did show choir. I did everything and wanted to do it all really well. So when I came to college, the idea of narrowing and picking one thing, I didn't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was I thought the point was to be good at everything. So the major that I chose is called MBB, Neuroscience and Behavioral Biology, and it was actually really interdisciplinary and incorporated biology, anthropology, and psychology classes all together, which is why I picked it, because I was it's kind of not choosing one thing.
How did you find it though? What was the process
of picking my major?
Of entering and then finding that.
Man,
do you remember any specific moment where you're
honestly, when I started school, I had this idea of what types of things smart people do.
What were those things? What did you think smart people do?
Doctor, lawyer, that sort of thing. Those were the options in my head. And honestly, teacher was like way low on the totem pole.
Yeah.
I thought like, I will never do that. What a waste of an Emory education that would be to become a teacher. But I didn't want to be in school forever. So I was like, how can I sidestep the doctor lawyer thing? And then neuroscience just sounded fancy. Seriously, I thought that sounds like a smart person thing.
Smart person thing.
And it was really interesting too. Like I got to take all these really cool courses, especially in the upper levels. I took a course called Music and the Brain, and it was taught by the department, the head of the music department, the head of the neuroscience department, and a string quartet. We had a string quartet sitting in class with us every day. It was crazy.
So it was like multiple professors and professionals kind of doing
it was
all
really
this
cool.
one time. Okay.
So, that sort of shows one of my first, I always tell people about that class, and I think it really images what education should be looking like, as we move into the future, which is just integrated and making connections, that sort of thing, which is what I do in my work now.
Yeah. But so you said going up into the upper levels, the upper electives, you're kind of like even more immersed. So like kind of when did you start thinking, because I know like looking at your bio, you then went to UGA, right? And then you studied education. But what happened in between that time? Like before you graduated, after you graduated?
Yes.
Talk me through that time, what you were thinking.
My friends all had these really grand plans upon graduation. My best friend was going off to be a dentist. People were going to travel. My other friend got NCAA graduate scholarship, and just lots of impressive things. And I honestly really didn't have a good sense of what am I really passionate about. I was just sort of relieved to be finished with basketball. I played basketball at Emory and school, and so I just patched together this plan. It's funny how haphazard a lot of these my life path ended up being. I just patched together a plan to go to grad school, because also it was 2009 and recession had just happened, and like there weren't as many jobs, and so a lot of my friends were going to grad school. So I thought to myself, there are a couple of things that had happened. In the 2 previous summers, I had worked at a program called Summer Institute for the Gifted, once at UT Austin and once at Emory. And that was a fun experience. I had grown up being in gifted education programs as a kid in elementary school. Was
it different being part of that program kind of older? Like were you able to see different parts of it? What do you remember about that?
I remember it was a fun summer job. One thing that stood out to me was that so many of the kids were on meds. Like I remember at lunch, the nurse would be like, medicine time, and this line would form. It was a program for 4th through 8th graders, I think. And just this epically long line of kids lining up to get their drugs, whatever it was, like Ritalin, whatever. And that really made an impression on me. But anyway, I when I got to the end of school, I thought, okay, what would a smart person who's not going to be a doctor or a lawyer do next? So oh man. So then I started researching gifted education master's degree programs. And the top 3 were University of Connecticut, which was too dang cold, the University of Virginia, which was okay, and then UGA. And that one was close to home, which was important to me. So I picked UGA and was accepted, thankfully. And then, that's how I ended up in Athens.
Okay. And so then you were in your program. How did you learn about the freedom to grow Unschool for the first time?
Yeah, so
talk about that.
So the gifted education program at UGA is embedded within the educational psychology department. So it was a 2-year program, and about well, no, I should start by saying that when I came here, one of the things that I was doing in order to help pay for life was I was working at J.J. Harris Elementary School as their after-school program assistant. And so I was doing that, and I was taking classes, and then when it got time for me to do my practicum for my program, I started assisting in the gifted education class at J.J. Harris Elementary School as well, with a really awesome teacher who was my supervisor. And so I was having those experiences and being prepped for becoming a gifted ed teacher, like the woman I was working with, and was slowly just becoming really disenchanted with how that was, with what that experience was like.
But what specifically was disenchanting about that?
So in my after school program, growing up, I did all sorts of, I worked with kids in lots of different varieties, whether it was through church or summer camp or tutoring, babysitting, etc. And I'm really passionate about letting kids be creative and active. I'm an athlete, so all of that. So I was trying to bring in those things into my work in the classroom and in the after school program, and that was met with, how should I say this? It didn't always work in that setting so great, to the point where the principal there, who is amazing, she called me into her office and said, the kids, they're really too loud. They're moving around a lot. You need to help them stay still and just work on their homework and after school and be quiet. And I really struggled with that because they had already been sitting in school for 7 hours, so another teacher coached me to get a whistle, start blowing a whistle at the kids, which I did, which was effective, but I felt like my soul was dying. And, it was 100 kids in the cafeteria after school. There were other teachers who were kind of helping, and they were having kids put their nose in the corner, like it was 1954 or something. And, that was just not a happy experience. And finally, the principal called me in one last time, and she said, I don't know if this is the line of work for you. And I was devastated, and I cried. And then I started thinking, maybe this isn't the line of work for me, but all I know to do, what I'm really passionate about is working with kids. And so how am I going to use this gift that I think I have? Maybe in another setting, I don't know. And so I just started this frantic Google search in the middle of the night because I was about to finish my program and I was getting married and I needed to know what was going to happen in my life. And I was searching just kids, programs, Athens, gifted, alternative, I didn't know. And Freedom to Grow Unschool came up on the Google search. And so that was how I found it. And what I found was hilarious. A really eclectic, I shall say, web page made by the woman who founded Freedom to Grow. And she posted, she had a page where she listed resources, if you want to learn more about the alternative education movement, which I didn't know what that was at the time. But she had posted the TED Talk by Ken Robinson, which is the most viewed TED Talk of all time, and the title of it is Schools Kill Creativity, which is really provocative. So I clicked that, and I was like, oh, I'm down the rabbit hole. What is this? So I called her the following day, because this was in the middle of the night, and asked if I could come and visit this Unschool, which sounded just silly to me.
So that's how it's appeared? That was your initial thought? You're I don't know what this is?
I said, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to find out. And also a weird thing was it was in my neighborhood, the apartment that I lived in at the time. It was basically right around the corner, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, because I was reading it originally started just in her house, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. It was at her house. So. the next day I found myself driving in circles around the Chicopee-Dunwoody neighborhood trying to find this house. And anyway, then I pull up to this huge house that just like shoots up out of Peter Street, 6-bedroom, 6-bath house. And I pulled into the backyard where we were supposed to park, and there were kids like running around playing outside, and there was a dog, and Terry came up to me and she's talking 90 to nothing. She's a very fast talking person, like really creative and lots of ideas, and it's like she has to get them all out at once. So then I met her, and she welcomed me inside once their break was finished to see, what it was they were working on. And it was in the fall, I think in September. It had only been open for a month. So she was in there with 9 kids, and they were reading a book. She really centered her curriculum around like the different holidays throughout the year and different cultural holidays and things like that. They had just finished a Day of the Dead festival, and so now they were reading about Thanksgiving. So she had them all sit down in this room that functioned as like their community gathering space. And there were couches everywhere. So the kids are like snuggled up all around different corners of the room. Some of them were drawing. One was building with Legos, I think. There's another kid that was just like curled up in a blanket next to her feet, and she was rubbing his back, and she's reading this book called The Myth of Thanksgiving, which I thought was great. I was like, okay, wouldn't read that in public school. And the kids, none of them were, looking at her. They were all sort of fiddling and doing other things. But then she would ask them a question about the book, and they all chimed in and remembered everything about it. And so at that, when that happened, I was like, my heart's beating really fast, because this is what I always thought was possible with children, for them to be engaged in lots of different things at once. Because a big part of my issue with my own schooling was I was bored a lot of the time, and I would have to bring other things to do while, the lesson was going on, and I would get in trouble. And so that really resonated with me. And then just to see how she was able to be like physically affectionate with the kids and not have to do like these awkward things they train you to do in school. Just the whole thing was happening in the context of love, basically. Really meant a lot to me. And so she started suggesting that I come and intern, because at the time she was the only staff member, and she supplemented that by inviting students to come in and intern for her. So she had about 9 UGA students at the time that would come and just volunteer a couple hours a week. So I started coming every Friday and teaching the kids neuroscience, which was fun. I showed them pictures of brains and had them act out being neurons, and it was awesome. And then at the end of that year, I still didn't know what I was going to do, but I went to Terry for advice. I actually brought my husband with me. And it was like, first of all, you need to meet this lady, because I don't know how, but she's going to be a part of my life. And, I would love for you to help me process through her suggestions. So she started telling me about all of these alternative ed programs where I could go and get like other degrees that were more self-design kind of oriented, and just different things I could be a part of. And then after we had talked for about, 2 hours, she said, or you could come work for me, but I don't really have that much money to pay you. And I was like, stop talking. I'll take the last option, please. That sounds great. I didn't know you were looking for someone.
Yeah.
So that's how I came on staff officially. And the following year, she and I were the 2 co-teachers. And we had twice as many kids, and we moved to a new building.
Mm-hmm. So how was it being like a more kind of like more involved, full-time kind of teacher?
I was enamored with the whole experience. Probably that first year of co-teaching, I did a lot more just like, just watching and learning from Terry, who taught for 20 years in the public school system and just had lots of awesome experience. She did special ed, and so, we had lots of kids there with different diagnoses like ADHD, sensory processing disorder, things like that she really had some awesome interventions for. So it was really cool to learn from her, and I'm sure I contributed things here and there, but it was a really good learning year. I mean, it was my first year of teaching full time.
Yeah.
Was at the Unschool. So
before we get a little further, can you just kind of describe like unschooling and kind of like and how then it was manifested in this this unschool?
Certainly. So I'm glad you asked that, because the term unschooling, we kind of use it in a loose way. The term was originated in the 70s by a man named John Holt, who was really all about families divesting from the public school system and doing their own thing. Like, he wrote a book called Teach Your Own. And so it was more about a more radical form of homeschooling, where the parents were helping the kids develop a curriculum based on the child's interests. And that is what Terry did with her own son when he was in middle school. And that ended up being an amazing experience for him, and he went on to do all these awesome things. And so as she was growing more and more frustrated in her work in public school, she started thinking, well, what if I just had a school where we did what my son did, but with a group, and what would that look like? So that's where the idea for Freedom to Grow came from. So our version of unschooling, obviously there's 20 people, so not everyone's doing their own thing, but the way we try to accommodate the kids' interests is that we let them vote on a unit that they're all interested in, or the majority of them are interested in. We just start with a blank slate and ask the kids what would it be cool to learn about, and they'll say everything from puppies, like puppies is on the list every single time, to puppies, outer space, pirates. Last year candy was on the list, and then we'll narrow it down after several days of debating. We'll narrow it down to a smaller list, and they'll have a little ballot and they get to vote. So that's our version of unschooling. There are other parts of it too, but it's all about following the kids' interests in hopes that you'll have this intrinsic motivation and buy-in from the kid, and then you don't have as much you don't have to do as much like forcing, and there's like a lot less behavioral,
like the whistle, right?
You don't need the whistle because the kids are excited about what they're learning.
So you just kind of mentioned how you designed the units, right? But originally how the founder Terry had kind of designed by holiday. Like, when did the change start happening? Kind of you changing that model.
So Terry is an amazing human. I wish if she were in this interview right now, it would be hilarious. Like, we'd just be laughing the whole time. She's the funniest person in the world. Her approach to it, first of all, she did so much work just to get it off the ground. She did all the legwork of going around town, finding families, explaining. She held info sessions in her house. She invested so much of her personal money into it. So that was a really big undertaking. And then she really just sort of relied on her experience in the classroom. Like, from where I was, from my viewpoint, I was like, how does she know how to just like go into that topic and then that one and that? She was really flowing with it because she was just an excellent teacher, and she taught about things she was really excited about. Like, one time we did the first year that I was co-teaching, we did a unit on the Harlem Renaissance, and she did all these awesome art projects with the kids. And it wasn't that they never chose things, but it was more like she would insert something that she was really excited about, and then just from listening to the kids, then they would decide to do medieval unit because the kids are into swords, and then they would be making duct tape swords. And I would say it was a lot more organic when Terry was in charge. Now we have more systems in place just because it grew and there's more people involved, and I tend to be a little bit more type A personality. She and I were a great pair, but I'm sort of like, what's going to be the ritual every time, how we do this sort of a thing.
I gotcha, yeah.
So that's how that changed.
That changed over time, yeah. Yeah, it depends on personality too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So kind of the question I want to get to is, I know you've talked about the process of having to unschool yourself, right, as a teacher. Like, I mean, you've gone through a system of, schools and like schooling in general. So what was that process like as you started, interning, then working, co-teaching, right?
It was interesting. So it's really funny. One of the Freedom to Grow moms that I love so much, she always says, we have this impossible task of creating for our children what we never had for ourselves, and often something that we've never seen before. So that's what we're trying to do. I did the school system and did it well, and it's really, really a part of me. So stepping away from some of those more traditional things has been interesting. And along with it, I mean, I found a lot of things just about myself have been changing. My hair went natural and I started caring less about like appearances, and I've learned how to flow with the schedule instead of freaking out about like rushing and the pressure and all of that. So it's been really freeing just personally. And at the same time, I'm still learning, learning new ways of interacting with children. I'd say at the core of what we do, aside from the structure of our program, is we interact with children in a different way, which I try to model for my staff and for the parents that are a part. It's instead of talking about the children when they're present, we talk to them. When a kid has an idea that sounds crazy, instead of saying like, there, Johnny, we're not going to do that. Or, I'll kind of deal with the tension of like, okay, this kid wants to light a torch and breathe fire in our circus. That doesn't seem safe, but I really trust this kid, and it could be a really cool scientific thing for us to figure out why it works, So it's sort of like really pushes your edges in terms of boundaries, traditional boundaries that we have with kids. And I find, I have to resist the easier thing, which is to just say no, and just let them learn through the process instead. Another example is a big part of what we do is these conflict resolution conversations. So instead of having classroom rules that I come up with, and my coworker and I, we always involve the kids in creating the agreements that govern our community. So, when it comes to things like screen time and using tablets and things like that, there's always kids that are like, we should be able to have our tablets whenever we want, and instead of saying no and just leaving it at that, we always have a conversation. because it comes up every year, we always have a conversation about, well, what would that look like if we could have them all the time? What do you think would happen? You know, and we'll discuss. And then inevitably, it's so fascinating. There'll be like other kids who are like, that's not healthy. We should be outside sometimes, you know, and they'll have this debate. And then I just get to watch, and it's really fun. And we usually end up coming with these wiser decisions that are more moderate. But they came to it on their own instead of me just saying no. You know, that cuts off all the learning. So it's fun and it's uncomfortable a lot of the times because I just, you know, I have a strong desire within myself for order, but sometimes things get a little messy for the sake of the learning, and I find that to be really valuable for the kids.
Yeah. So do you feel like it gets easier over time? Like you're able to relinquish some of that control and trust more?
Yes. Also becoming a mom helped with it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how is it that like when you kind of working with, you know, kids who are not your own, but then you have a daughter now?
Oh man.
And what's the parallel there? What's the differences?
Well, how is that? I mean, I have a lot more, I'm able to connect with parents a lot better, which is a huge part of my work. And to just empathize with the difficulty of, you know, these decisions that we have to make as people caring for children. You know, the way I run Freedom to Grow and the way I parent at home are different. Because, you know, our home space is, like, our faith sort of dictates how we treat each other there. That at Freedom to Grow, it's not a Christian school, so I really value that diversity, and it's really important to me that everyone feels welcome there. And you know, so there's I approach it more as like group think, basically. Like we arrive at, you know, how are we going to treat each other as a group. I don't know if that describes that well, but I try to make it a place where the parents feel like the way their parenting style is kind of like welcomed in, you know, rather than being opposed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool because I was just talking to a woman about this morning. We have families from all walks of life, really in a way that I rarely see in other circles outside of like public spheres, because we get like really traditional Christian homeschoolers, and then we get like kids who live on a commune somewhere in Athens, and like that cultural collision. It's so beautiful. It's really, really cool. Yeah. Like at our camp this summer, we had 2 kids who came who were vocal Donald Trump supporters, and then we had some other kids who were really not, and that lunch conversation was super interesting, and I just sat back and watched. It was great.
Yeah. So they just kind of learn to talk? The kids talk to each other?
Yes, what a novel idea for people to learn to talk. Yeah. Yes, and it's funny because I get people, I hope this is cool to talk about. I get Christians who will call me, you know, and they'll be kind of like afraid. They're like, what is this exactly? You know? And I'm like, it's a place where you can be yourself and you learn how to talk with people who are different.
That's what you say? Yeah.
More or less. Yeah.
So speaking about that, like you talking to parents and kind of recruiting more like families, right? So you became the director of the school after Terry in 2012, right? Mm-hmm. So what was that like when you took on that role?
So Terry had an emergency family situation that necessitated her moving quickly. And so halfway through my first year working at Freedom to Grow, and also my first year teaching, she says to me, I'm going to need to move, and I don't know what's going to happen to the school, but I thought maybe you could buy it. And I thought that was laughable. at the time. I was 23 years old and I didn't know anything. So after thinking about it and checking in with my inner circle people, I decided it was a great opportunity. So at that time, I purchased the business and became director in May of 2012. And then proceeded to make a lot of mistakes very publicly in front of people, which is the best way to learn, right? God bless those people who were like my first clients. They were just really...
You mean the families? With the families?
Yes. I mean, I think that I'm a great person at this job because I got it. I got what Terry was after in terms of the feel of a classroom, you know, and the environment of learning. Like I really understood her vision. So it was, in terms of like the vision, that was seamless, that transfer. But then in terms of like the practical things, I had to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And that's been a process.
So what were some of the difficulties? You don't have to go into super specifics about the specific things that happened, but
big ones
challenges
were, I had to figure out my style of discipline. Like, how do you hold kids to high standards of behavior? And then also not do things that I felt uncomfortable doing, like having them put their nose in the corner, you know? So I had to figure out, like, where's that middle ground where I can really like connect with these kids and let them know what's appropriate and what's not without having them like move their clip from green to red. So that took some time, and then communicating with parents through that process was difficult. I had to learn how to communicate with parents. That was the scariest part. Parents are scary. They're scary. But it's great because they, you know, held me to a really high standard. So I had to figure out how to meet it, which was good. I had to figure out, how do I balance giving kids lots of freedom, particularly outdoors, and keeping them safe at the same time, you know, because that's really important to me, like in a day and age where schools have canceled recess and they're not building playgrounds anymore. It's like a big allure of what we do is we have 20 acres of pine woods behind the building for the kids to play in. So I had to figure out how that was going to work. Still figuring that out, but yeah, it's been an adventure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, how about successes then? Like, or things you've seen, things that have grown?
Yeah.
Like what? Can you talk about some of those?
Yes. So really the turning point for me as director, where I started feeling competent, was after a year of working with a really good friend of mine who's named Evan McGowan. He was my life coach for a year as part of a program that he was starting. And he is an amazing just facilitator. He started a nonprofit here in Athens called Wild Intelligence, and just really knows how to run excellent programs for children. And so he was coaching me on what's the invisible structure that makes a program work really well. And that's exactly what I was missing at the time. Because I knew how to like practically like make things work, but there was a big picture piece that was missing. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, but I want to give a shout out to his book. It's called, oh my goodness, let me not mess up the title. It's called Coyote's Guide for Connecting to Nature by Evan McGowan and a couple other people. And the model, the 8 Shields model that they present in that book really kind of made things click for me in terms of, oh, here's how kids flow through a day. And so our program should match their flow. And then we won't have those moments where I'm trying to make them do something that they really don't want to do. And if that makes sense. So, Yeah, once we highlighted some specific cultural elements that we wanted to bring in to really make Freedom to Grow feel like something bigger that all these families are part of. You know, things like we wrote a school song, and we just started these rituals like for how we begin every day and end every day, and I don't know, things like that were like these are our things at Freedom to Grow. We do this. Then it started really the feeling of community that I had always wanted us to have really clicked. So the thing that I'm most proud of right now is that on Friday night when they were doing the fireworks downtown, I wasn't there, but my husband was there with my daughter, and he said, "The whole Freedom to Grow crew is sitting next to me." You know, they're really, really close, these families now. Yeah. And it's awesome because it's like I said, people from really different walks of life. So I think that is the best backdrop for learning that you could possibly have. You know, these kids are stoked to get to Freedom to Grow every day because they're going to see these people they're really close to. Mm-hmm. Some of them have been with us for years, and so there's a trust and a bond between us as mentors and the kids that I think really allows them to feel free to take risks in their learning. You know, when kids feel under pressure, they shut down rather than open up, which is what we want them to do. So in terms of success, I think that's our greatest success, is that we've really created a loving community where kids feel safe to be themselves and to try new things, and where they make these great relationships. I'm really proud of that.
What's the experience of when a kid comes to the school for the first time for the first year? How do they, like, from what you've seen, like, how do they adapt, or what did they experience?
Good question. So it depends a lot on where they're coming from. For kids who come from, you know, unschooling or homeschooling, Freedom to Grow feels a lot more familiar. For kids who come from public school, I call them the public school refugees. They often have this adjustment period, which is really common for kids who transition to alternative schools. And there's actually a lot of literature about it. It's called the deschooling process, which is where they just have to adjust from, you know, hearing a bell ring every 50 minutes and 3 hours of homework at night to not those things. And it looks different for every kid. Some of them just jump right in and they're like, "Oh, finally, thank goodness, I'm really motivated because this is fun." And some of them are like, "Oh, we can do what we want? Well, okay then. I'm going to do whatever I want." And it's just that way for a while before they decide, like, "Oh, I really do want to learn something. That looks like fun." It just, for some kids, it takes a little longer to get to that inner motivation place after being externally motivated for so long with grades and tests and stickers and all of that. So,
yeah. And you guys go on a lot of field trips as well. When did that become a thing?
Yes.
And how do you structure those?
I love our field trips.
And what do you think is kind of like the underlying, like the reason why, like, you do field trips and kind of you have outside time?
So field trips are a really big part of what we do, and here's why. It's because, you know, in real life, like outside of these institutional structures, you're learning things all the time. Like we're learning right now, but we're not in a classroom. So we go on lots of field trips just to reinforce that idea that the world is your classroom, to be cliche, but you know that this isn't limited to this space. Like the catchphrase right now in education is we want kids to be lifelong learners, right? So to me that means that we're showing them learning opportunities that are all around them and not just in these contrived settings. So we've done really cool things. I'm trying to think of interesting examples. So this spring we did an 80s and 90s unit, and of course the 80s was the birth of hip hop. So we went to a local dance studio and took a hip hop class. One of my favorite field trips of all time was we did a family heritage unit where the kids were interviewing, learning about their ancestors and things like that. And then we branched off into learning about genetics, and we were researching, I don't know how we found this out, but we discovered that a professor at UGA is the person who located the genetic mutation that causes four-leaf clovers. So I emailed him and set up this field trip, and we went over to the plant science lab, and he showed the kids all of these crazy clovers, like purple 9-leaf clovers that they've been growing from different samples from all over the world, and like really organically connected. Field trips are my favorite. That was a really cool one.
Because you're connecting human genetics and passing down with plant genetics, kind of life, the kingdom of life.
Yes. It's just great, like that unit ended up being so interdisciplinary between like science and history. And then we developed a really strong connection to the Gospel Pilgrim Cemetery, which is in my old neighborhood, actually the neighborhood where the Unschool started. It's a historic African-American cemetery that we've sort of adopted, and we go over there and pick up trash from time to time. But there's a local historian who has done lots of research on the people who were buried there and their stories. So that was another field trip for that unit. We went to the cemetery and got to hear the stories of people from Athens, so there's like service component, history, science, math. It all just flows together.
And so with your school, right, Unschooling, the kid, kind of the age ranges are from 6 to 12?
Yes.
So what kind of happens after the kids, like after they turn 13? Like, what happens with the kids? Like, do they go back?
I will tell you what needs to happen, and then I'll tell you what actually happens. What needs to happen with kids that age out of my school at age 12 is they need to have all of these amazing options for free school high schools to go to that are centered around the same model, that kids can learn that they want to, and that if they follow their interests, they'll be good to go. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in Athens right now. So most of the kids, well, I shouldn't say most, the kids do a variety of things at this time. They'll either go back to traditional homeschooling, they'll go to public school or private school. Those are sort of the options that are available. I would love to be able to offer K through 12 Unschool in the future. We'll see if that happens, but right now I'm kind of strapped with like what we're doing now. But yeah, kids really, really need more options. So I'm all about, like, whenever I hear someone else is starting a school in the area, I call them and I'm like, yes, thank you. Because families are so desperate for something different to do with their kids. I get calls all the time from moms who are just distraught because, teachers and principals have told them for years that their kid is broken, basically, that they need to medicate them and that, the kid is the problem. So it's just a big disservice to families when that happens.
So do you think there are, or do you know of like a lot of other type of unschooling or alternative programs kind of here, or like that you're connected with?
I will happily shout out the other programs.
And kind of how they approach.
Well, what's great about it is each program has a different focus. So Washika, the Washika School is a Montessori program which is a lot different from what I do, but also awesome. So they focus on younger kids, and obviously they follow the Montessori model. They have this really cool like organic food element, and it's awesome. Then there's the Double Helix STEAM Academy, which is obviously STEAM themed: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So they get to do a lot of cool projects that involve design and things like that. And then a new program just opened at Bristlecone Farms, which is going to be all about basically like it's going to tie in agriculture a lot into the curriculum, and the kids are going to be working the land, and it's going to be really cool. It's just opening this fall.
Yeah.
So there's a few around, but not enough, if
enough.
you ask me.
Okay.
You know, and I'm really passionate actually about just helping this idea to take root here in the Southeast region, because California is busting out with unschools, and
really,
you know,
it's very
the Northeast. Mm-hmm, Dallas is another hub. Asheville has a lot, but yeah, there are these these dead zones, and the Southeast is one of them, where unschooling hasn't caught on as fast as it has in other parts of the country and the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have in mind right now, just the very beginning stages, but I want to host a conference to kind of get the word out about the alternative education movement, and to bring all of the, you know, alternative educators together, and to be able to, I guess, legitimize our work. Is that legitimate?
Yeah, legitimize.
Legitimize.
Legitimate, I think, is, yeah.
We
That
want to
sounds
make
right.
our work seem more legit, because it is. Because, you know, like, this is how kids learned for all of time up until the year 1852 was they were learning in the context of their families. They were learning outside. There was no Common Core standards, you know, and people still became educated human beings. So it's really important to me that people know that they have these options available, especially in this region, because it's where I'm from and I love it. And you know, right now, a big part of my job is educating parents about what this is, and about their rights, their legal rights as parents, you know.
So what is like the reaction of when you talk to parents about unschooling, and parents who are like approaching you versus parents who just like, what are the different reactions?
Yes.
There?
So a lot of times most of the people that I talk to have found me out, you know, and they've watched the TED Talk, and they're like, I knew this was possible. This is what I've been looking for, kind of a thing. And they're just relieved because they didn't know that this sort of school existed. Other times, so I was at a kids expo not too long ago, tabling for Freedom to Grow, and I was just like, you want to learn about Freedom to Grow Unschooled? Like, talking to passersby. And this one lady came by, and I asked her, she said, no, everyone I know is happy with their school. And I just smiled and said, okay. And I was thinking, you must not live in the same planet that I live on, because no one that I know is fully happy with their school, teachers and parents and kids alike. So I'm hoping that, ultimately I'm hoping that our school system can change, because it's important that everyone have access to education. You know, just the current way that we go about it is not the best.
So do you think kind of widespread access to education can be done through or achieved through this model of alternative education? Or do you feel
no, I don't know. I'm just sort of, right now, I've just got my head down and I'm serving the people that I serve.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what will happen, but hopefully my goal and Terry's goal was just to serve as a model for what's possible in any classroom. The things that we do, letting kids move around and do art and go on field trips, like you can do that at any school. So
I gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my hope. And actually I would love to develop more partnerships with people involved in the public school system, just so that folks can see, what our approach is.
Yeah. So besides just what you mentioned and kind of the conference you have in mind, what do you see in the next couple years, next 5 years, let's say, for Freedom to Grow?
Oh boy.
Or what do you hope that manifests in your heart?
What do I hope? I don't know about the size of it, or, I don't have plans for like a building and things like that. What I hope is that Freedom to Grow can be just a beacon for our area and our region, a place where people can come and learn new ways of teaching and new ways of being, maybe new ways of parenting, and a place that brings educators together to envision new and better ways of working with kids. Yeah, that's my hope. Like, I'm not trying to like hoard all of the families for myself, That's not, we're not the perfect match for everyone. But what I love is bringing people like you into the space and just saying like, here is a thing that is possible, and now you can go do it in your town or wherever, or whatever it looks like for you.
Taking down the veil in front of people.
Yeah, yeah.
Or one of the veil.
Yeah, and I'm really passionate about working with young adults in particular. So I think it could be really cool to develop some sort of teacher training, like where people could at least get like some credits for coming and taking a class in partnership with us. Yeah. I don't know what that would look like, but I think
was that one
cool.
Like, was that an option when you were doing your like master's degree, to do like an alternative education kind of internship or
no. Right now there's all kind of barriers up between that being a reality where people are actually like getting credit for a degree or things like that. But we'll see what happens.
Okay, we'll see. Okay, well, Lora, as we wrap up the interview, is there anything else that you would like to talk about or mention before we conclude?
What were things that passed through my mind?
It's all right if you don't have anything, or you just want to give it another shot.
Like I should. I think I would just want to add that there are schools and unschools like this all over the globe, and that there's a lot of information available to people who are interested in learning more. I have a tiny list that you can peruse on our website, but I would just encourage folks who feel kind of isolated to seek out the information and the people in your area that are doing this too, because they're everywhere.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, for being so open, so passionate.
Yeah. This is great.